Welcome to You Can't Make This Up, Boss Level Stories, the show where real life workplace chaos meets real world career and leadership wisdom. I'm your host, Charles Smith, leadership coach, military veteran, corporate storyteller, and someone who has seen the type of workplace absurdity that I probably would not have believed if I had not seen it for myself. This is the official podcast of Charles Smith Leadership Coaching, LLC. For more information on the services I provide, please visit my website at www.csmithleadercoach.com. Today's episode is When the Customer Was Not Right, How to Handle High Pressure Situations. So one of the things that we have all heard, both as customers ourselves and as members of companies that have customers, is the customer is always right. Now, that is a very broad statement because the customer definitely is not always right. But what happens is a lot of times, as a measure of goodwill, as a measure of trying to maintain customer service, companies will do things to alleviate customer concerns to try to get that customer being a repeat customer. Now, there are times when the company is truly wrong. Maybe the service is subpar. Maybe the product is not what it's supposed to be. And in those cases, obviously some kind of correction, some kind of concession has to be made. There are other times, though, when the customer, maybe they're wrong, maybe it's subjective, but the company will still make a concession just because it's subjective, it's up to interpretation, and just to be the bigger person, if you will, and just to maybe even get that customer to be a repeat customer, they will have a concession to make them feel better. A great example of this is a restaurant. If you've ever gone to a restaurant that you know is a good restaurant, the food is really good, the service normally is really good, and there's a problem. Maybe the waitress is having a bad day. Maybe your steak came out medium rare and you want it to be medium well. In situations like that, the manager may do things like give you a coupon for a future visit, or he or she may do things like cover the cost of the meal for that time. All in the event of saying, you know what, I want this customer to come back. I want them to patronize us again, obviously, because customers are the ones that buy the service and spend money. And I'll make this concession to make them happy and make them come back later on. However, there are times when the customer is truly wrong, and it's not subjective and it's not objective, but it's a situation where they are truly, truly wrong. And in those cases, what a company has to do is essentially stand up to the customer. Because as a company, as an organization, you're in business to make money. And when a customer complaint happens, generally speaking, it has the potential to cost you money in either that sale through, discounts you may have to give because of an error or other things going on. So when there's a legitimate customer complaint, normally there's a cost to the company. But some customers try to take advantage of that and try to have complaints where there's not really an issue or when they're even wrong. And that's when you as a manager, you as a leader, has to stand up and say, no, I can't do this, because even though we believe in customer service and understand what's going on, I don't want to unnecessarily cause my company, cost them unnecessarily any money. So I have a story today that details this exact situation. And then I want to give you some tips on how to practically apply this. So In some of the many unique jobs that I've worked, one of the most unique jobs that I worked is I worked for a company that built the antennas that go on boats. And these antennas or would allow you to get internet connection, TV shows, TV downloads, all kind of comlink. And one of the very cool things about this technology is it's very similar to like DirecTV. So if you have a DirecTV antenna at your house, they put it on the roof, they point it toward the sky where the satellites are, and that's how you get your TV signal. Well, the ones that this company built go on boats, and it's the same principle, except that because these boats are moving and they could be anywhere in the world, these antennas are placed on a stabilized platform that basically keeps the antenna pointed at the satellite while the boat is moving underneath. So no matter how the boat is moving, no matter where it is in the world, it has the ability to point at that satellite. So these are very complex machines. They do an amazing job. But one of the things is that they have what's called a radome over it. And a radome is basically a big plastic shell or a material that prevents things like seawater and wind and other things from affecting this antenna, because the radome does a very good job of keeping that antenna free from damage from the elements. That's going to be very important to the story. So these antennas, you see them on cruise ships, you see them on yachts. I think even naval ships like aircraft carriers have them for the purpose of having that communication link with those satellites. So at this particular company, I was a quality manager. So one of my main jobs was to make sure that everything going out the door met our quality standards and different things like that. And for the most part, our products did very, very well from a quality standpoint. And where there were issues, obviously, we took care of them as needed to be taken care of. Well, one particular day, I get a call from one of our European customers. And we had customers all over the world, but one of our main customer bases was in Europe. And they told me something that at first did not seem believable. And it was in an email, and it was a very strongly worded email. And what they were describing was that one of their customers who owned a boat, I believe it was a yacht, was on their yacht, and the radome flew off of the antenna in the middle of the ocean. So obviously, this is bad on several levels because one, now that antenna is exposed to all the elements that I was mentioning earlier, but also radomes don't normally fly off of an antenna. They are normally bolted on there very well, and for one to fly off means that there had to be some kind of catastrophic failure. So in my mind, I'm getting the information. I'm trying to understand what's going on. And there was a few hours of emailing back and forth. And the whole time I was trying to figure out, how did this happen? And as an engineer, I'm like, well, was there a structural failure? Did something hit it? Was there a bolt that failed? There was all these things that were going through my mind. Well, our parent company gets involved because the customer not only emailed us, but called them and was complaining very, very badly about what was going on. And they were complaining so badly because they had ordered 40 of these particular units. They wanted to get all 40 of these units for free. Now I thought, okay, that's mighty bold because we've got one unit that we know something has happened. We don't know quite what has happened, but in their minds, oh, this one unit failed. The whole thing must be bad. We want all of them for free. So that led to a conference call with them and a conference call also with our parent company. And at this point, nobody really understood what was going on as far as how the radome had flown off. And so I knew as a quality manager and as an engineer, we're going to have to do some level of of investigation to figure out what this is. And we're going to need pictures, and we're going to need notes, and we're going to need to figure out and dig and figure out when this unit was built and who built it and all that kind of stuff. But on this meeting, there was a good bit of very loud talking. And screaming in a meeting, in a corporate meeting, normally is frowned upon. It's not something that's good. And our customer was irate, and our parent company was irate, and our parent company wanted us to at first just go ahead and give them all this stuff for free. And I said, no, 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 no. Let's do an investigation first to really figure out what was happening and why it was happening. So we get off the phone, and the whole time it didn't feel right that the radome just flew off of the antenna. So I worked with the engineering team and the production team, and we figured out which radome had the issue, and we figured out the serial number and the date it was built, all the things that you do during an investigation. And everything seemed to be exactly what it needed to be. The person that built it was one of our better builders. There was no material issues that we could see. Every part of the procedure had been followed the way it needed to be followed. So I'm perplexed at this point. Now, granted, as a quality manager, this is what I'm supposed to do, solve these kind of hard problems. But I'm looking at the pictures they sent of the base where the radome flew off, because the radome was gone. And what was interesting is that there were no remnants of the radome. So that meant that it didn't break, because, if it had broken, it would have been like parts of it that were still bolted on. So I'm like, okay, that's not the issue. But then I looked at in one of the pictures and noticed that, well, they're the bolts that are there. And I went to the engineering drawing and saw a note saying, please make sure to change out the shipping bolts with the installation bolts upon final installation. So I did some more research, because now I'm beginning to kind of see a picture of what may have happened. So I go talk to the engineers. I say, hey, I saw this note and I saw these pictures. How big of a deal is this? And they explained to me that the shipping bolts were designed to keep the radome attached to the antenna while it was in a crate, while it was being shipped. And the reason for that is you didn't need to hold it down that firmly. And then when it got to the boat or the ship or whatever it was, you put the more firmer bolts on there. Okay. And at that moment I knew, well, there's a structural difference between the shipping bolts and the actual bolts that need to be for actually mounting it on the ship. Now, part of the reason for this as well, the final part of it, and they weren't part of the original assembly, because basically where this goes on a boat, some of it goes on the roof, some of it goes on a pole above the roof. So they left that step to the installer to do, to make sure it was done properly. So now I have a picture of exactly what is happening. And I know that, okay, what happened was they got this unit, and instead of following the instructions and changing out the shipping bolts, they kept those in. They used those to install on the boat, and they weren't strong enough to hold the radome. So I sent the customer an email. I said, dear so-and-so, can you please confirm that when you installed the unit on the boat, that you transferred, that you removed the shipping bolts and you installed the actual installation bolts? Send. Didn't hear a response the next day. 24 hours goes by. Don't hear a response the next day. 48 hours have gone by. On the third day, I get an email. Dearest Charles, Our sincere apologies for making this terrible mistake. Indeed, we did not install the correct bolts, and we installed this radome with the shipping bolts rather than the installation bolts as was confirmed in the instructions that go with this antenna. Please forgive us for the problems that it caused, and thank you so much for your looking into this matter. And just like that, the customer was not right. Now, what they had done, like I said, and like he admitted on the email, they hadn't paid attention to the instructions, or their technician hadn't paid attention to the instructions, and so they installed this antenna with the wrong bolts. Now, had we just laid down and said, "Oh, customer's right. Oh, we're so sorry," that could have cost us tens of thousands of dollars, if not more. It would have been a hit to our, it would have been a hit to our reputation as a company, and more importantly, it would have led to a lot of just distrust and everything. But because we investigated it, because we figured out what was going on, because we understood, and they confirmed what happened. Now, our parent company was still a little bit upset because they had jumped the gun and they had sided with the customer. They had not waited for the investigation. They had not waited for us to be able to say, "Hey, this is what's going on." They sided with the customer and then realized, "Oh, well, we shouldn't have done that." So the customer apologized, and our integrity and our quality and our stuff stood as being what it was. So why is all this important? Well, the customer is not always right. And while as a business owner, while as an employee, while as the employee of an organization, you always want to make the customer happy. There are customers who will try to take a situation that maybe their fault and they don't know it, or maybe maybe it's their fault and they do know it, and they will try to use that to cheat their vendor. It is what it is. And so as a leader or as an employee in general, if you see something like that, then it's your responsibility to call it out and try to fix it. So there are a few key application steps that I want to talk about that'll help you in a situation like this. Because one of the things about it, stuff like this is a high pressure situation. Anytime, most transactions, if you think about it, from going to McDonald's, if that's what you do, to going to maybe a restaurant, to going to a gas station, to whatever product you buy, Amazon especially, same type thing. If you purchase something and there's no issue with it, everybody goes about their way. The vendor has their money. You've got your product for whatever you need it for. Everybody is happy. When everybody is not happy, i.e., when the customer gets something and it's not what they need or what they expect, it immediately becomes a high pressure situation for the company that's actually making the product. It's product they thought they had sold, money they thought they were going to get, and all of a sudden now they're not getting that money anymore. So it's immediately a high pressure situation. And a lot of times companies will cave, and they'll cave unnecessarily. But here's some tips to when that kind of thing happens, how not to cave, and how to still take care of the situation and not be rude to the customer. So number one, you got to understand the situation. So in my case, I had to understand exactly what happened and get pictures and get, I guess their customers' explanation to really understand, like, how did this happen? And then it became clear basically what happened, even though it didn't make sense at the time. But it was one of those things where it's like, okay, I need to know what happened. I need to know, was the boat in unusually rough seas? Was the wind blowing hard? All of the circumstances to get to understand why this particular situation happened. Okay? Or at least understanding what was going on. The next part of it is you have to figure out what actually happened. It is so important to take the time to troubleshoot, to deep dive, to do whatever your organization needs to do to figure out why something happened. One of the tools I've used over and over again is from Lean Six Sigma, and that's the 5 whys. And that's asking why, and then asking why again, and then asking why again, to really understand and get to the root cause of what is going on. There are also, and so 5 whys is a type of root cause analysis. There are other ones as well, but it's all about understanding what is going on. In my case, we had to understand why a radome that is designed to withstand high winds, it was designed to withstand, the ocean environment, how it just flew off, and how this is something that very rarely happened. And so either it was a new problem that was going to continue to happen even more, or it was a one-off that wasn't actually the fault of the radome itself. And so that's what we did. We figured it out. We had the pictures, we had the instruction procedures, we knew who built it, and we had pictures from the actual customer of what was going on that showed there are shipping bolts on this where they're supposed to be installation bolts. Okay, so you got to figure out what happened. And what probably one of the most pressure-packed points of all of this is when you're in a situation like this, there's always a rush to figure it out. And you need to be urgent. You need to do your investigation with a sense of urgency, but you don't need to rush to the point where you're not figuring out what's happening. So you got to take your time and figure out what actually happened. And then finally is kindly, with evidence, show the customer how they're wrong and do it in a very polite way. Nobody likes being told they're wrong. And even with evidence, some people still get very upset. But there's a way you can do it. So like in my case, I didn't gloat. I didn't say anything off to the person. I said simply, ma'am, sir, did you do this? And I posed it as a question because I wasn't accusing them of anything. I'm like, hey, did you follow this step? And when they and I can imagine them on the on their end reading that email and being like, you know what, we did not, and then figuring out, oh boy, we're in trouble. So it worked out pretty good. Like I said, they were able to fix what happened, and then they were able to, with confidence, install the rest of those antennas. We had a huge sale from that as far as the number of antennas that we sold and the cost they were. And everybody walked away from that situation happy, in a situation where it could have been really, 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 really bad. So take care of your customers. Most of the time, they're going to be right. Most of the time, a simple concession will keep them to being repeat customers. But make sure that when they're wrong, that you let them know and you take care of it accordingly. Have a great day. Interested in premium content? Join our Leadership Lounge on Patreon. There, you will get weekly motivation videos, discussion posts on critical leadership topics, live session leadership discussions, and pre-recorded webinars, plus other bonus material and so much more. To join, please visit my Patreon page, patreon.com/Charles Smith Leadership Coaching, LLC.